There is something nobody told you about the dark. Not the dark you know, not the dark of a power cut, not the dark behind closed curtains, not the darkness of a phone screen going black at 2 a.m. while you're still awake, still uncomfortable, still unsure why. That kind of dark is thin. It ends. You know it ends. You've always known it ends. But the dark that early humans lived inside, genuinely, completely, without remedy, that was something else entirely.
Warm.
And here is the contradiction that most people never stop long enough to examine. They did not simply endure it. They did not white-knuckle their way through it until morning came. The archaeological record, the ritual sites, the burial chambers, the cave markings, all of it points toward the same deeply uncomfortable conclusion. They preferred it. Not because they had no choice. Not because they were less intelligent, less aware, less sensitive to danger. But because the dark, for hundreds of thousands of years, was doing something for the human mind that daylight never could. And whatever that thing was, we have spent the entire span of modern civilization trying and failing to replace it. That replacement is what this is really about. Because if you understand why early humans went toward the dark instead of fleeing it, you will understand something about yourself that no amount of evolutionary biology class, no popular psychology article, no self-help framework has ever quite managed to name correctly. Let's start where you least expect to start. Not in a cave. Not around a fire. In a contradiction. The common assumption, the one that runs through almost every school textbook, almost every documentary, almost every casual conversation about early human life, is that darkness represented danger, and therefore early humans feared it, avoided it, and built their entire survival logic around getting away from it. Fire was invented to defeat darkness. Shelter was built to block it out. The whole arc of human progress, in this reading, is basically a war against the night. That story is wrong. Not slightly wrong. Not wrong in a minor detail. Wrong at the level of motive, wrong at the level of psychology, wrong in a way that has caused us to fundamentally misread what fire was actually for, what caves were actually used for, and what the darkness was actually doing to early human consciousness. Here is what the evidence shows instead. Neanderthals, at sites like Breathtaking Cave in southern France, went 600 meters deep into a cave system. Deep enough that no trace of daylight exists, no sound from the outside world penetrates, no orientation to the surface is possible, and they built structures. Circular arrangements of broken stalagmites. Deliberate, repeated, geometrically intentional. Not living quarters. Not storage. Not defense. Ritual space. Built in complete, consuming darkness, inside the earth, in a place no predator required them to go. They chose to go there. That is the fact that breaks the standard narrative. Not survived the dark. Not stumbled into the dark. Chose it. Built inside it. Returned to it. Created meaning there. And then, much later, at Lascaux, at Altamira, at Chauvet, the great painted caves of Europe, produced by Homo sapiens somewhere between 17,000 and 37,000 years ago, the same pattern appears with even greater force. The most extraordinary images in all of early human visual culture were not placed in the mouths of caves where daylight could reach them. They were placed deep inside, sometimes a kilometer from the entrance, in narrow passages, in chambers where you have to squeeze your body through rock just to reach them, in absolute, uncompromising darkness, lit only by the fire a person carried in their own hand. You would have seen these images in flickering, moving light. The animals would have seemed to breathe. The walls were chosen deliberately for their curved, textured surfaces, surfaces that made the painted animals appear three-dimensional, alive, animated by shadows. The darkness was not the obstacle. It was the medium. It was the entire point. So now ask the harder question. Why? Not how did they do it technically. That question has been answered by anthropologists and archaeologists in sufficient detail. The harder question is psychological. Why did darkness produce something in early human experience that open daylight did not produce? What was happening in the dark that required the dark to happen? Begin with the body, because that is always where the truth lives first. In genuine darkness, not modern darkness, but prehistoric darkness, total and absolute, the human sensory system undergoes a measurable shift. Sound becomes hyper-significant. Every breath is audible. Spatial awareness moves inward. The skin becomes sensitive in ways it simply is not in daylight. And perhaps most importantly, The boundary between self and environment begins to dissolve in ways that no daylight state replicates. Early humans who spent extended time in deep caves, as suggested by the presence of ash deposits, animal bone remnants, and what appears to be long-term habitation evidence at certain sites, were not simply sitting in the dark. They were inside an altered mode of perception that their world did not otherwise provide. Modern sensory deprivation research, conducted in complete darkness and silence, consistently produces the same cluster of effects: heightened emotional sensitivity, increased pattern recognition, intensified memory consolidation, and, most consistently, a profound sense of meaning, presence, and connection to something larger than ordinary waking thought can access. These are not hallucinations in the clinical sense. They are the baseline operations of a human nervous system freed from the constant processing load that light and noise demand of it. Early humans did not have a theory about this. They did not need one. They had the experience. And the experience told them something true. The dark was not empty. It was full. Full in a way that daylight crowded out. Now here is the second layer of contradiction that most people never reach, because they stop at the first. If darkness produced this altered, heightened, meaning-saturated state, and if early humans recognized this, and deliberately used caves and darkness for ritual, for communal experience, for whatever cognitive and spiritual function those painted chambers served, then fire's invention was not primarily about defeating the dark. It was about carrying the dark with you. A torch or a small lamp creates a bubble of visibility, but it does not eliminate darkness. It makes you portable inside it. You can go deeper. You can stay longer. You can navigate without returning to the surface, but you remain essentially inside the dark, not outside of it. The fire that early humans carried into caves was not a protest against darkness. It was a tool for exploring it. This reframes every fire you've ever seen, every image of early humans gathered around flames. That circle of warmth and light in the middle of the night, it was not a retreat from darkness. It was a structured experience of darkness with a human center. The firelight held the dark back just enough to allow social function, eye contact, gesture, shared story, recognition of faces, while the dark remained present, close, surrounding, doing whatever the dark did to human consciousness. The stories told around fires, the sounds made in those circles, the rituals performed by firelight in open air, these were happening in darkness. Surrounded by it. Shaped by it. The emotional register that early humans reached around a fire, the depth of communal feeling, the transmission of memory and belief through spoken narrative, all of it was amplified by the dark that lived just beyond the flame's reach. Which brings us to the piece of this that should make you genuinely uncomfortable, not in a theatrical way, but in a quiet, personal, recognizable way. We eliminated the dark. Systematically, culturally, completely, across a period of about 200 years of industrial and electrical development, we removed from human experience the thing that human experience was built inside for several 100,000 years. We made every night into something early humans would not have recognized as night at all. We made every sleeping environment into a place of ambient glow. We made waking at 3 a.m. into an experience of phone screens and ceiling light rather than the profound, total sensory recalibration that total darkness once produced. And then, with tremendous cultural confidence, we express surprise that human beings are anxious, disconnected, unable to find meaning, unable to feel genuine communal depth, unable to reach the kinds of emotional and cognitive states that feel like more than surface noise. The dark that early humans chose, the dark they built ritual inside, the dark they painted inside, the dark they descended 600 meters into the earth to inhabit, was not a problem they were solving. It was a resource they were using. A technology of consciousness as real and as functional as any stone tool, except this one required no manufacture. It was already there, every night, vast and available, doing what it had always done to the human nervous system. We inherited that nervous system. Every single one of us carries inside our biology the full architecture of a mind shaped by darkness, calibrated by darkness, dependent in ways we still don't fully understand on what darkness does to attention, memory, emotion, social connection, and the experience of meaning. What do we do with that now? That is not a rhetorical flourish. It is a genuine question that researchers in chronobiology, in sensory ecology, in cognitive anthropology are beginning to take seriously. Not because darkness is romantic. Not because this is about rejecting technology. But because the accumulated evidence from archaeology, from cave research, from sleep science, from sensory psychology, all points toward the same quiet conclusion. Something important happens in the dark that cannot happen in light. Early humans knew this not as theory but as practice. They organized their ritual lives around it. They made their greatest art inside it. They built structures in it 600 meters underground and left those structures for 45,000 years, waiting to be found, waiting to tell us something we have spent the modern era loudly and expensively ignoring. The last thing to say is this. The Chauvet Cave, the oldest of the great painted caves, was sealed by a rockfall approximately 20,000 years ago. The images inside were preserved in perfect darkness for all that time. No light touched them. No air from the outside world reached them. When researchers first entered in 1994, they found the bones of cave bears still arranged on the floor. They found torch smear marks on the walls where artists had moved through. They found handprints, negative handprints, made by pressing a hand against stone and blowing pigment around it, so that what remained was the shape of absence, the outline of a hand that was no longer there. A hand reaching through darkness toward you. The person who made that print understood something. Not in words, not in theory, not in the language of neuroscience or evolutionary psychology, but in the bone-deep, body-certain knowledge that comes from standing in complete darkness with nothing between you and the oldest parts of what you are. Tell me what you think the dark still does to you. The answer might be more honest than you expect.